Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 25th meeting of the Placerville City Council. I'd like to ask you to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'd like to ask you to remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of Sacramento Police Officer Tara O'Sullivan. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just to follow up, to recognize Officer O'Sullivan's sacrifice at the age of 26 and only 6 months on the street. Her end of watch came on June 19th, 2019. So on behalf of the City of Placerville, we'd like to send our thoughts and prayers to all those that have been affected by this tragic event. And that all of our police officers are always near and dear to our hearts. So thank you for recognizing Officer O'Sullivan's ultimate sacrifice. I'd like to ask the City Clerk to please call a roll.
Mayor Acuna?
Here.
Councilmember Borelli?
Here.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Here.
Councilmember Taylor?
Here.
And Councilmember Thomas will be noted as absent.
Thank you very much. And good evening to all the staff that's present. Nice to see everybody here. Beautiful first summer evening. The City Council has met this year. This evening we have an important presentation by the Seroptimists of Placerville International. Item 3.1 this evening is human trafficking awareness. I'm not quite sure who's going to be making the presentation, so if you could come up to the podium and introduce yourself to the audience as well as everybody that's watching at home and will watch on YouTube when we post this. Good evening.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce our president.
Could you pull the microphone down there?
Sure.
There, where they're very directional. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to introduce our club a little bit and our presenter. Seroptimist is a coined word that means best for women. And Seroptimist is a powerful and globally organized force of women that seeks to empower women. Seroptimists are united in the global stand against human and sex trafficking, and we have a seat at the United Nations Council on the Human Condition. At all levels of the Seroptimist organization, we're called upon to help eradicate human trafficking. The Placerville Club has chosen awareness and prevention training as its local contribution. We partnered with Judy Knapp of Prevention Works and the El Dorado County Health and Human Services to bring an appropriate curriculum to one of El Dorado County's middle schools. So Judy's presentation will tell you about the first offering of the curriculum, which was taught by her this spring at Herbert Green Middle School.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ooh, I got to find it. Let's see here. All right. So why human trafficking? Well, even in our small rural community here, human trafficking is a real problem. It is a form of modern day slavery. And as you can see on the slide here, it is considered to be one of the fastest growing criminal justice industries in the world today. It's second only to drugs. So this is a huge problem across our nation and internationally as well. So again, this is a global issue. Interesting, that tattoo on the back of that lady's neck is kind of standard. It signifies ownership by a trafficker. So as we can see, not only is it a global issue, but it's also a domestic issue. And you can see we have between 100 and 300,000 young victims of sex trafficking here in the United States. Now, interesting, 60%, as it says there, are what we call runaway or throwaway youth. And as we can see across the United States in the California, well, here in California, but across the United States, we see a lot of the kids that are trafficked are in the foster youth system. And some of you may know that the county does have a foster youth task force on human trafficking. Every county receives funds from the state to do something about human trafficking. And so they have started a task force, and part of that task force they have asked me to do prevention education in the schools. So numbers, their most recent numbers, as you can see, 13 victims identified just in 2017 to 2018. And since the beginning of the task force in 2014, they've had over 60 victims now of sex trafficking here in this county. And as you can see there, the number identified as CSEC is commercial sexual exploitation of children. You can see that they were all prior or currently in foster care. So one of the things I always like to teach when we talk about human trafficking is the impact that this has, because this affects our cities and our counties as well. As you can see, the cost of people that have broken bones. So the medical costs, the behavioral health costs are tremendous, as well as drug use that may be used or is forced upon youth that have to endure this as a coping mechanism, as well as, it says here, the inability to trust, that long-term effect of how this literally destroys a person. Self-destructive behaviors, all of this costs cities and counties a lot of money. And that's why we want to move our systems to prevention-based, so that we can save money, spend it where it needs to be spent in education with the kids in other ways. But that's why Seroptimists have started this program, is to prevent these tragic events from happening. And so that's why we piloted the project at Herbert Green School. This is an evidence-based program called Born to Fly. And what I like about it is that it gets what I call goes beneath the water. We can teach people about human trafficking and the terrible stats and even the recruitment techniques that traffickers use, but kids need more than that. And this is one reason why programs like DARE did not work, even Scared Straight did not work, because when you just try to use the scare tactics, it doesn't go deep enough. Kids need to understand that choices have consequences. Okay, I mean, as adults, we think that's so obvious, but not for kids. They need to know whom they can trust. We did a lot around relationships. What's a healthy versus unhealthy relationship even look like? And because Romeo traffickers are one of the main things that we see, especially here in El Dorado County, in rural communities, we see more trafficking take place online. So cyber safety. And Romeo traffickers, what they do is they try to lure kids in means of, like, I'll be your boyfriend, I'll be your girlfriend, that type of form. And so we really talk to kids about that. And again, just knowing healthy versus unhealthy relationships and how you can be coerced with the manipulation that takes place with trafficking, things like that. And of course, we did a assessment to see how the kids did during the process and how much they learned. This was just one. This is actually Seroptimist Barbara Smiley writing on the board for me, which was so nice to have help. What the kids were talking about. And one of the things that you can see on the right, hopefully you can kind of see, is different forms of manipulation and coercion that we discussed with the children, as well as target places that traffickers look for kids and how they're tricked, especially with money. And like I said before, I'll love you. Your parents don't love you, but I'll love you, that kind of thing. What part of our results that we looked at is just the awareness piece, and you can't see it from here, but the large bar graph on the left was they weren't aware of human trafficking at all before we started the program, but after we started, they all felt that they were very aware now. And so just having that awareness is a huge piece for these kids. Let's see, these are some of the quotes that the kids said about the programs. And the one I wanted to point out was the third one down. I like that we learned about things that usually aren't talked about. And I think that's a really profound statement. We must be talking about these things with kids. Okay, that's the only way we can keep them safe. And so we're seeing more of that in our education system. And in fact, there is, I can't remember the number, AB something, that says that schools have to do human trafficking prevention education now in the schools because it is such a big problem in our nation. So that's pretty exciting, actually. I like it when it's mandated. Makes my job easier. Not only did we teach students about this, we taught the 7th graders about human trafficking prevention. What they did then is they went down to the 5th grade and taught the 5th graders about human trafficking prevention. So that's what we, one of the steps that we take in this layered approach to prevention education is students teaching other students, as well as we held a poster contest, and Lynn's going to bring you up to see the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place winners. So after the 7th graders educated the 5th graders about it, the 5th graders grouped together, formed little teams of 3, and made these posters. And the kids nominated these 3 as the top 3, and the Seroptimists were so kind to give the top winners $25, $20, and $15 gift certificates for the winning groups. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to promote that cyber safety messages as well as instill empathy in children. On a side note, the lack of empathy is why we have so much bullying in schools. So I also like to instill a lot of empathy building in my programs. These are some of the other posters just for fun, just to show you. The kids put a lot of work into their posters. We're actually in the fall, we're going to be putting up all the posters on school campus to bring the messaging back to the youth. Here's some of the winners, some of the kids and the winners. The top left is one of the teachers took their messages. We also educated the adults as well, and the teachers took the message and actually did some English assignments around the human trafficking prevention messages that we were giving them. And of course, the Seroptimists are so wonderful. They gave a pizza party for the 7th graders for all their hard work this year. And I really like to thank the Seroptimists. This has been a pleasure. I've been doing prevention education in this community for over 20 years, and this has been a great collaboration between Seroptimists and Health and Human Service Agency and Herbert Green, and it's just been a pleasure to work with them, and it was so wonderful to have help in the classroom. I'm not used to that, so that was really nice. So I really want to give these gals a round of applause for all of their work and doing. It was wonderful. Any questions?
Well, Judy, first, thank you very much for coming this evening and bringing the presentation. This is the second time I've seen it, and it's a very important message to get out to our community because while we are blessed with a sense of safety and people can get falsely comfortable thinking things like that don't happen here, no, yes, they do.
They do.
And thank you for going out to the 7th graders. Question I might have is, where are your efforts this year and going forward with being able to continue to deliver this program?
Well, we're hoping, and it sounds like they're going to, we're hoping that the county will continue this collaboration with the Seroptimists and myself, and we're hoping, we're going to see. We don't know whether we're going to increase the amount of schools or we're going to do more in-depth work at Herbert Green. Herbert Green is one of our target schools because of the population there. You know what, one thing I forgot to mention, the 7th graders that carried the message down to 5th graders were all, it was a special education class. Every student in there had high trauma and had neurodevelopmental trauma. And so a lot of trauma in their past, and so it was quite a self-esteem builder for them as well. So we may do more work at Herbert Green. I'm hoping to, because that way the longevity of the program, and I like to collect data over, multiple years as well. But I'm hoping that we can also, tack on another middle school too.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions from the other council
I just have a
members?
real quick question.
Sure.
Is this a county program? I know you mentioned the county, or do you get grants, or how?
So the county, because they have this money that is trickled down from the state for human trafficking prevention, they paid for it, and it wasn't much, I don't charge much. And so, that's why the county was involved with this, so we had a contract with the county.
Since since you've started this program, have any of the other schools come to you and ask you to come to their school or maybe to?
Not yet, because they don't really know about it. This was a pilot project. And so once the word gets out, we probably will. That's what's happened in the past.
I think it'd be wonderful to have it in every school.
Yeah, it really would be. And I forgot to mention the average age of recruitment for trafficking is 12 years of age. Okay, so we must be teaching our kids even before 12. Okay.
Thank you, Patty. Good questions. Kara, did you have any comments, questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'd just like to say thank you. It's a really important program. So.
Thank you.
Michael? All right. Well, thank you very much, Judy.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to hearing that you get successful and you can bring it to Placerville and anywhere it's needed in the county to keep the awareness where it needs to be.
Perfect.
That's in a high position. So, and thank you to the Seroptimist also for all the work that they do in our community. We're blessed with one of the oldest active Seroptimist groups in California, and it's been a pleasure I've worked with them here in the last 2 or 3 years, and I know that they're small but very mighty.
Yes,
So
that's so true.
I appreciate all that they do out in our community also. And thank you again for coming this evening.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. Bring us to council member comments for this evening. Councilmember Taylor.
Just real quick, I enjoyed a nice night out at the fair with my family, so that was fun. But other than that, I don't really have many comments for tonight.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Borelli, did you have?
Along those same lines, I also, I just wanted to say thank you to the fair they hosted us for a preview night, which is what Kara was talking about. And then I also attended the El Dorado Rose Contest, and I want to congratulate Diane Maloney, who was selected this year. And I want to also say thank you to Darla Hernandez, who's the outgoing Rose. Once again, they represent our city and our county well at many affairs. I went to the Legends, which is, for those of you who've been around Placerville for a long, long time, it's all the old guys, the bands that used to be here and be so popular, Ricky and the Red Streaks and all that gang, and they put on a great show and kind of highlighted by one of our staff, George at IT, and his band. I missed the wheelbarrow race, which was important this year, but I had tickets to see Andre Bocelli, and so I chose that one.
It's probably air conditioned too.
Yeah, it was. And let's see, I also attended Fire Safe Council presentation. Heather Campbell presented her show, which I told you, her presentation on, it's called Home Hardening, and she gave a lot of tips on what we can do just for our homes, and I think it's well worth anybody going online and checking it out. And I visited the juvenile hall here. I don't know if you're aware, but our juvenile hall is closing. They're going to, they've had quite a decrease in people that were sent there, and so they're going to, for the time being, they're going to use Tahoe, and then they are going to rehab that building, and I don't think they're sure yet what they're going to put in, and then the new juvenile hall is going to go where the sheriff's department is building. So that, I cannot believe I've lived here all this time and have never visited that facility, but I finally got there as they're closing it. So, and let's see, what else did today I went, Caltrans sponsored an annual, they call it Annual Sharing and Coordination Forum. We had it here at Town Hall, and we had different representatives from the county and Caltrans and city, and we got to share projects that we're all working on and wish lists, and it was very, very nice, and I really thank Caltrans for doing that. So,
Anything that stuck out on that one?
lots of things.
Lots of things.
I'll share, and that's it.
Oh, thank you, Patty. Vice Mayor Saragosa, do you have any announcements this evening?
Kind of the same things. I attended the opening of the fair, which was a great time, and I think a few of us even got coaxed into riding on the train together. Thanks, I think, my wife's fault. I know going back from our previous meeting, both Councilmember Borelli and I were able to attend and the opening, sort of the opening to the 150th Wakamatsu. I was there to behalf of the mayor to
forgot about
to
that.
present the proclamation to our sister city in Warrabe. And that was a great event. They actually gave us a couple of etchings that are just beautiful that will be over on display at the county. Our supervisor Veerkamp has those, and we'll take good care of them over at the county. And then this Friday, along with SACOG, we're going to be doing a forest management tour with some of our other council members and mayors, part of SACOG. We're going to be going into the forest here at El Dorado, meeting at Apple Hill, at least Brian and I, and then taking, I think, about 10 to 12 SACOG members and staff out on a tour for a forest management tour. So it should be pretty interesting. I'll report back those, not findings, but kind of what the discussions were, and how we can address some of our bigger needs in terms of just the management and fire and a lot of other things. So it should be an interesting thing, I think, for some of our neighbors that don't have some of the same fire issues as we do. But certainly the whole area will be affected by that.
Is that the main purpose, to show the folks from down the hill?
Yes, exactly. And we've also invited some state legislative staff as well to really try to get them a better sense of what's going on, sort of the unique challenges that we have in our areas as well. So it's also a good tutorial for those legislative staffers as well.
Super, good.
I think that's it.
Well, thank you, everybody. Just real quickly, I'll ask Cleve, the fire ordinance is coming back soon. But before you answer, let me ask the chief how we did at the fair. Were there any incidents of major concern that we were aware of? It seemed like it operated very smoothly this year.
Each of the watch summaries I saw after the nights of the fair, there was nothing that stood out. In fact, that was stated in the summaries. Nothing eventful that night. So everybody was on pretty good behavior, but a lot of it has to do with the way the fair is organized and how things are set up, where alcohol is served and allowed, that type. I guess in the past it's been a little different, but they've done a better job in the last few years.
So it showed. It looked as though things were really organized this year. So thank you for that brief report, unexpected report. Appreciate it, Chief. Cleve, how are we doing with bringing back the draft for adoption on the new fire-safe regulations for Placerville?
The vegetation management ordinance
That's
will
the
be
one.
back before you at your next meeting for introduction as an ordinance. We're ready to move forward with that now. Obviously, you'll want to review it again. It's gone through several iterations, but we think we're ready to go forward with that. Also, we will have a draft for consideration, actually for introduction, actually for adoption of an urgency ordinance regarding prohibition of open fires in the city, as you had requested. So we'll have both of those ordinances prepared for you to consider for adoption at your next meeting.
All right, very good. And that fire prohibition is just for this year.
Right, it'll run through December 1st is the way we're outlining it right now.
All right, thank you. I just appreciate that. We want to make sure that we let everybody know that we are still working on that fire-safe ordinance and that it is going to be coming, hopefully, forward for some final adoption processes. Thank you very much for all of the information this evening. I'll ask our city attorney, item 4, closed session, if you had anything to report out this evening.
Yes, I do, Mayor. Tonight, the City Council rejected the demand of Allstate Northbrook Insurance, which is actually a subrogation claim based upon the claim previously considered by the Council of Lewis Phipps. The demand was rejected by a 4-0 vote with Council Member Thomas absent, and no other reportable action was taken.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Is there, moving on to item 5, adoption of the agenda?
Move for adoption?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Adoption of the agenda. Ceremonial matters, we have none this evening. Public comment, this is the portion of the agenda where any member of the public is welcome to address the City Council on a non-agendized item. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes and your subject matter items that are pertinent to the business of the City Council. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the Council on a non-agendized item this evening?
Sue Rodman, resident of Placerville, and I have a post office box, and so I wanted to say thank you to the people who got work done on that parking lot and the entrance to the post office. It is much improved.
You
So
didn't do the
thank you.
dip?
Thank you, Sue. They can't see it from space anymore. Good evening, sir.
Kirk Smith. I was just going to suggest that you give some consideration to getting rid of the 2x2 committee as we know it. There's certainly an efficient purpose for doing that, streamlining things. I do remember one council member years ago describing that as a way to avoid the reporting requirements of the Brown Act. As long as you have just 2 city council members and 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, then you don't have to have public agendas and that kind of thing. So the suggestion simply is that you make notice of the meetings where they're held. You don't have to have a formal agenda, no public comments, but still the public would have access to what's going on. And I think it's particularly important with reference to the courthouse. 2 weeks ago, $2.8 million was snuck into the state budget for acquisition of property for the courthouse. And I might parenthetically note that it does not state in that cryptic description whether it's the courthouse we have now or the one some folks fantasize about. It could be getting $2.8 million to acquire property next to the present courthouse to expand it, for example. But it's not the way we want government to operate. We want it to be open and the like. And I think what we saw a number of times is that almost everything said about the courthouse project turned out not to be true. And I'll just give you a couple of the most famous ones. We were told that we had to push it through in something like, 2015, because if we didn't, it was a courageous effort to keep it in the city limits. Why they were even proposing to send it to Rancho Cordova. And then I came in later and I presented documents from the Judicial Council showing that wasn't the case, but I've never heard anybody correct it. And what's much more troublesome about that is that one of those persons, I found out much later, was part of a special committee the Judicial Council sets up to ensure there's local input. There was a local advisory committee, Jack Sweeney was on it. And so all of the proposals they looked at was just basically one. Putting it down on Ponderosa was silly because they're not going to move it outside the city limits. And then we hear about the Blue Ribbon Committee. Blue Ribbon Committee went for long periods of time without meeting at all, and you'd think that if the purpose was repurposing, the imperative would be to keep going forward. So a lot of things that we learned, like for example, the building downstairs, I'm just looking at what's given to me for time, Mayor, but down the street we have the post office building and next door the telephone company building, and those were all supposed to be like mustard and ketchup, part of the purview of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Then I'm at the Board of Supervisors last year, and that comes up. They voted to put them as surplus, and we now know that that's not just, willy-nilly. There was a specific purpose. So that's why it would be good, for the sake of open government transparency, that a 2x2 committee be named as to who they are at all times, but also that you put a notice out where they're meeting and so the public has a chance to follow, so that we won't be surprised and learn about things after the fact. I know that would prompt me to send a lot more. Well, I'm just using what your timekeeper.
You're good. No, I think you've got 5 minutes going there. I think
Beg your pardon?
I think they gave you 7 minutes.
I can't hear you.
I think they gave you 7 minutes tonight, Kirk.
I didn't even look.
I didn't either, and
just
I
counted.
feel rude every time I have to look over at that
And
thing.
I'm gonna wrap it up because that's the simple request.
That's
Have
fine.
open government that we all can be monitoring.
I appreciate your comment. And the current members of the 2x2 are myself and Councilmember Thomas. So that is a part of the well, it's on to this evening's agenda, as a matter of fact. It's on every agenda, so. But we haven't met lately. We haven't met in over 2 months. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Eric Nelson, Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, honorably discharged. I've been appointed by the commanders of all 6 veteran groups to hand deliver a letter tonight that they've all signed. I'd like to read it into the record. It's very short.
Certainly. Go ahead, sir.
And just a reminder, 2 weeks ago when I was here, I left copies of our proposed ordinance. So this is a follow-up to that, or not ordinance, a proposed resolution. Dear City Council, attached, please find a proposed resolution. We respectfully request this item be put on the agenda of the next City Council meeting please direct all correspondence to Eric L. Nelson, PhD. That would be me. It has my cell phone and my email address. We would respectfully request when you get to item 14 in the agenda tonight that you have a roll call vote on this request. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you do for our city.
Thank you, sir. And if you would give that to our city clerk, and we will make sure that that request is formally accepted. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on a non-agendized item this evening? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I'll move on to item 7.1, which is actually written communication. Cleve, did we have any new written communication this evening?
You have one item that was passed out prior to the meeting from Mr. John Carici in relation to item 12.1, which is the reuse RFP.
All right.
You can
Thank
consider
you.
that at that time.
All right, thank you very much. All right, this brings us on to consent calendar. All items will be considered under one motion unless a member of the council wishes to have an item removed for further discussion. Is there any item that a council member wishes to have removed for discussion this evening?
I just think that maybe we should highlight 8.5 and the new person who's going to be on.
Okay. Well,
Just call attention.
do we want to pull it, or do we want to?
I just want to
Okay.
acknowledge.
Let me see if
that-
there's any member of the public that would like to comment on any of the consent calendar items this evening.
Kurt Smith. Mayor, I just thought that the subject of salary increases was so important. That deserves some attention. I wouldn't really know whether they're too high or too low. I do think that we're fortunate in this community because we have fabulous support staff people who may well be very underpaid. They not only do the duty of making sure the trains run on time, but it's just done in an extraordinarily friendly fashion. It makes you feel like you're part of a small town, which it's always been. I didn't see any data that shows us what the comparison is for employees of other municipalities of the same size, whether we're up or down. There might be ways to look at merit pay, but that can always be complicated. So I thought some discussion about that might be helpful. I don't know how it compares to the private sector when you're coming to specific jobs that are comparable in the private sector, and how you do trade-offs where you have more job security here that you don't have. I don't know how many people in the private sector get cost of living increases. I know that many people out there working in 2008 suffered major times where their salaries and what they could demand for work dropped down. So I just don't know how it compares. It'd be helpful to know. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kirk. Any other member of the public wishing to comment on the consent calendar items this evening? All right, I'll bring it back to the council. I would just ask Councilmember Borelli if you would just like to briefly comment on 8.5.
Yes, Councilmember Thomas and I sat in on a review of we had one person apply for, we had a vacancy on our Recreation and Parks Commission, and we interviewed Kristen Becker and found her to be a person that we think is going to be a real asset for the committee, and I just wanted to acknowledge that she has been appointed,
Thank you, Patty.
or will be.
Thank you to both of you and Councilmember Thomas for doing that. Normally, we have full-blown interviews whenever we have positions available on the Park and Rec or Planning Commission. But unfortunately, despite interest in some specific things, we have a terrible time getting general interest. And I know our city clerk had the application period open for months. And this one individual, Kristen, was kind enough to come forward. So we kind of skewed from what we normally do and went a little bit more efficiently with time and just got her interviewed. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'll ask Mr. Warren to just briefly comment on Mr. Smith's comments about where we sit as a community and our wage scales. I'm sure, given the amount of negotiating that we've done so far this year, that you have that information readily available. You could just briefly share it with us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So tonight's action to revise the salary schedule is a result of several months of negotiations with Local 39, which is a union. The city is required to negotiate with them per the Myers-Milius-Brown Act. The settlement for that included a 3% increase effective January, first pay period in January 2019. So that's what this recommendation is, to adopt a salary schedule with those adjustments, as well as the same adjustments to the Executive Management Committee. I can tell you that when you look at the cost of inflation, we've had some months in the recent past where it's been over 3%. And as you know, with rising fuel costs, groceries, so on and so forth, it's very clear. You also, we did not do a comprehensive salary study when we negotiated. That's not common. That's a huge undertaking. But I can tell you that you are lower in the market basket. So when you look regionally at other agencies, not too far from here, you are relatively low. And so anyway.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
So we are on the low end of the market, and as expected, and to do a market study is tens of thousands of dollars in many months of time. So, and I don't think that is also wise when we have comparable communities that we do look at. All right, so with that bit of discussion, is there a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll move.
Second.
All right, been moved and seconded. Could I ask the clerk to please call the roll?
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
All right, consent calendar is passed. Thank you very much. We're going to get to skip ahead here this evening. We have no ordinances or this evening. Public hearings. Hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving and adopting the proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 operating budget and capital improvement program. Good evening, Mr. Warren. And this is the final performance for the coming year's budget, I hope.
Yes, this is actually the third time you've seen most of this information.
I will throw it over to you,
I'll
sir.
try to keep my comments short. So just as a recap, over the past 6 months, the city's budget team, which is comprised of all department heads and the city manager, has collectively developed both the operating and capital improvement program budget in a manner that aligns with the City Council's established fiscal policies and maintains essential program delivery to the greatest extent possible. As part of the budget development process, the City Council held a special operating budget and CIP budget workshop on May 8th of this year. Staff presented the departmental requests, including alternative service levels, changes in program, capital outlay, equipment, and the CIP projects, as well as conference training and travel requests. And those were unadjusted, so kind of seeing the Christmas list, if you will. You held a second meeting when we got down to the bottom line of what we could actually afford, and that meeting was on June 10th, and staff presented the operating and CIP budgets for fiscal year 1920 and received input from the council and public. I also want to comment on Measure HL Committee held 2 meetings, one on March 18th and May 20th, to discuss potential street, sewer, and water system projects for fiscal year 1920. Just a summary, both the proposed operating budget and CIP budget include essentially the same revenue and expenditure assumptions. We did make a few minor adjustments, corrections, whatnot, but essentially it's the same assumptions that we spoke about on June 10th. So right now what I'll do is present those major assumptions. So we'll talk about sales tax, the general fund budget, as well as other city fund budgets, and the CIP budget. So just as a recap, your Bradley Burns sales tax, which is your general fund sales tax, it makes up 1 percentage point of your 8.25 sales tax, is your most significant local economic indicator. It currently represents a little over 57% of your total general fund revenue. We had a great year in 2018. Per capita, you had $471 per person in the city in sales tax, and we were ranked number 34. We were actually 38 the previous fiscal year out of 539 cities, so we're now 34. We hope to be number 1 someday. The quarter ending December 2018, which is our most current quarter that we have information on, actually increased by $52,888, or 4.14%, very healthy growth, slightly below the state average of 5.4, but still very healthy. And looking at your contributors, you've seen this before. When you look at this pie chart, you see your major contributors, including auto dealers and all the other business-related businesses that generate sales tax. Proportionally, they're about the same as last year. But when you look at auto dealers and building construction, autos make up 31%, building construction 16%, and that's important when you look at the next slide, which shows you your year-over-year growth. And you can see that auto transportation 8.34%, very healthy growth, 13.67% in building and construction. Then you have winners and losers across the spectrum there. We appreciate all of our businesses in the city, especially our top 25, and they're listed there just for information. Again, about the same group. There's a few that dropped off and a few that added there. Looking at your growth, you can see that in fiscal year 18-19, we anticipate 5,162,000 based on our latest forecasts, current trends, and looking at the statewide averages. And so for the quarter ending March 31st of this year, 3.2% is what we're, 5.1%, and then 5.3% for June 30th. And then you can see the growth of, we have 4.6 as of September 30th, 3.2 first quarter of 2020, and 2.5 for the second quarter of 2020 is what we're forecasting. So we forecast 5.2 million in 1920. And you can see how that compares historically, looking before the Great Recession and then after. This shows you in green, or red, actual sales tax, and then blue adjusted annually for inflation, and then adjusted cumulatively in the green. And you can see that when you take cumulative inflation for this coming year, we're actually at about the 13-14 level. Jumping into your general fund, it's your only true source of discretionary dollars. It pays for most major services like police, parks, streets, and recreation. In developing this year's budget, we started out with a status quo budget. It does maintain the current level of service to the greatest extent possible. We did have to make some adjustments this year, and we'll talk more about that. It does include the projected economic impacts of inflation, increased gas prices, increased chemical costs, so on and so forth, labor. You just adopted a new salary schedule. The salaries went up, benefits are going up, unfortunately. So the general fund budget does include a $75,000 contingency, which is the same as last year for unforeseen expenditures. Again, it does assume all the projected negotiated salary and benefit commitments to employees. We are in negotiations with one of our units, and we will be in negotiations with another unit later in the spring, but we, for right now, assume what our commitments are right now. Minimum wage is going to go up 8.33%, or $1, effective January 2020. That's assumed. Medical insurance is estimated to increase about 6% effective January 2020. Just as a reminder, there is no what we call GASB 75 pre-funding for retiree medical. We're just assuming pay-as-you-go, whatever the premium is today, but there's no set aside for future costs. It also includes $205,000 in addition to last year in pension contributions. And kind of drilling down on pensions just a little bit, as a reminder, your unfunded liability is $18.4 million, which is just slightly below, well, about the same as your current year budget, slightly below your current year budget just annually. So if you shut down the city for a year, that would pay for that, just to put it in perspective. Not that I'm suggesting that. So the annual pension contributions will increase by $246,000 across all funds this coming year. And looking at contributions between 2021 to 2025, they'll actually increase an additional $708,000. So we talked about this last year, why that's happening, and what we're doing to address those. We did address this year in the budget those cost increases. The water sewer rates that were adopted last year did assume those increases for the next 5 years, so that was incorporated. But For the general fund and other funds, other ways of addressing that in future years, raising revenue, pre-funding contributions, any reserves that are on hand to cut down on the interest costs, cut expenditures, issue pension obligation bonds, which I'm not a big fan of because basically you're kicking the can down the road and creating a real debt, and re-amortize your unfunded liability, which is again kicking the can down the road, just deferring the pain over time. So we do plan, Cleve and I talked about holding a workshop for the council later this fall to discuss this further and kind of come up with a roadmap of how we want to handle that over the next 5 years. So, alternative service level, what that means, it's kind of an odd name, but what it means is any change in program. So if we increase a program or we decrease a program, if we add a position, if we eliminate a position, that's what these are. Usually at the very bottom it would be all positive, but because of things like pension costs and other inflationary impacts, we're looking at actually decreasing in certain areas. So one thing and these are, I don't take this lightly, these are things that unfortunately as stopgap measures to balance the budget, and I really want to emphasize the team effort you had by your departments to really dig deep to figure out how to balance this year's budget. So the first thing we did, or one of the things that we're recommending, is freezing a vacant. It is a vacant position, or will be soon. It's actually filled right now, but there most likely will be a retirement here shortly. A savings of $126,000 across general fund and Measure J. There is a vacant dispatcher records technician. This is a 5th dispatcher record technician we added a few years ago. I believe it was filled for a few months and then it went vacant. So currently is not filled, but that's an area that we're recommending to freeze right now. And then as far as for your water sewer rates and your sewer rates, we assumed upgrading a water reclamation facility operator 3, a part-time, basically a half-time position, and upgrading that to a full-time operator 1. So the delta cost for that position was $55,683. There was a half-time senior maintenance worker, including benefits, that was never filled, that we were considering funding with SB1, or was funded by SB1. We decided not to do that and actually just contract projects, and so that position is recommended to be frozen. However, there's 2 senior maintenance worker positions that were identified in the water sewer rate study to shore up our water and sewer systems in this budget. So $102,000 for both, one's for water, one's for sewer. And then last year you approved a half-time accounting assistant to essentially process bills to Caltrans for your projects. So we're taking on more and more capital projects that are funded by grants. We're very successful. Our engineering public works departments are very successful in obtaining these grants. So, but it does take effort to, and it's not just a simple one-page invoice. Some of these invoices are several inches thick. So, but what we found was the accounting assistant 2 position, we did a recruitment. However, we weren't successful in finding the right candidate. So we're recommending upgrading that position to an accountant position. It's a delta cost of $15,000. So total net cost, including cost recovery, is $2,775, and you can see the spread there. General fund is actually negative $194,000 due to the cuts in the 2 police officer positions and the senior maintenance worker position. Public Works, Measure J, $48,000, $102,000 positive water, $158,000 positive sewer. Annual debt service, we just as a snapshot, just a reminder, your budget includes $2.8 million in annual principal and interest payments, and you can see the various issues. We did include the new 2019 equipment lease. It's an additional $56,000 to your operating budget spread across funds there. You can see total general fund $213,000 general fund, $57,000 to water, $2.6 million to sewer. Transfers, just real quick, a couple things I want to highlight. So one is your gas tax. Gas tax is going up. That's a good thing to our operations. additional $32,000 being transferred into the general fund for basic road maintenance. Parking fund, same. Measure J, this one's different. Now, we'll get into Measure J a little bit more, but what we're recommending is a transfer from your general fund to the Measure J fund because Measure J has exhausted its reserves. And in order to balance that budget, it's going to require a transfer of $271,000, primarily because the cost of PERS, primarily, the impact of PERS to that fund, it is far outpacing the growth in revenue in that sales tax. So general fund CIP, that's basically $26,000 going out, or excuse me, $28,000 going out for capital projects, actually a decrease of $44,000. And then your property and liability insurance are going up. The general fund's share is $8,784. So total net transfers out of $167,000. Your general fund budget before adjustments, revenues $9.1 million, operating expenses 9.1, and I will share when we talked at the budget workshop, there was additional cuts that were made, adjustments. Those aren't shown here. They're included in that second line there. So we were kind of running out of room and trying to focus on the major pieces. So net transfers out of $167,000. You can see at that point we have a deficit of $172,000. You include the $209,000 in negative ASLs, $105,000 for regular capital outlay computer equipment, $28,000 for CIP projects, and $15,000 for primarily safety and risk-related training. That's another additional $60,000, so or negative $60,000. So that decreases your deficit at that point of $111,000. The thought is funding your capital outlay and your all your capital outlay and a portion of your CIP out of fund balance. So we're basically recommending $111,000 to fund those two items this year. And then looking at your revenues, we talked about sales tax year over year, the budget 3.57% higher. All of the taxes, that's your property tax, franchise fees, transfer tax, transient occupancy tax, you can see actually increased by about $5,700. Construction permits, we actually assumed a $50,000 increase. We did assume development of the Point View Drive Hotel in this year's budget. We're optimistic that's going to happen. If for some reason it doesn't happen, we will have to go back and revise that at mid-year. Intergovernmental revenue, that $36,000 is primarily increase in vehicle license fee in lieu property tax. Charges for service, again, a lot of that is assuming the Point View Drive Hotel happens, and if it doesn't, that's something we'll have to adjust later on, but for now that's what we're assuming. Let's see what else. And other financing sources, in the past we've budgeted both overhead and our CIP cost recovery to engineering in that fund, and not to get too accountant on you, but basically CIP cost recovery is what we call a contra expense, meaning a negative expense. And so when we book those things, they're actually shown on the expense side of the ledger. So we clean that up and we're presenting it on the expenditure side. So total $9.1 million, about $130,000 more than last year, or 1.45%. Expenditures by department, you can see the differences there, and we talked about the cost assumptions. The negative for engineering, again, when we talked about that contra expense, so basically it reduced. That big drop of $280,000 is due to the transfer of the contra expense to engineering. All of the other ones are pretty self-explanatory. Non-departmental is debt service, principal and interest on leases, your audit, utilities, general utilities, animal control, which is about $242,000 by itself. That's overall. The major difference in transfers, so the $284,000 difference is primarily due to an increase in the transfers out. So increase of about 1.94% or $176,000, $9.2 million total. Another way to look at your general fund is what does a general fund dollar buy you? Well, it buys you 34 cents for police, 26 cents for community services, 10 cents non-departmental, 7 cents for administration, 7 cents for public works, 6 cents for development services, 5 cents for finance, 3 cents for engineering, and 1 penny for the elected officials. So you're very affordable. This is really the same information, just shown to you by category. Personnel, you can see, makes up about 70% of your general fund budget and how it compares year over year. Again, about a 1.94% change there. And again, another way to looking at it, I kind of like this graph because it shows you all the revenue compared to all the expenditures and how they kind of compare. For example, sales tax, what does that make up? It's comparable to just community services and police. It gives you an idea of what, proportionally what it pays for. And this one shows you revenues versus expenditures. So we're actually, good news, our latest forecast going into the end of this fiscal year, we project a $286,000 surplus, believe it or not, knock on wood. But next year we're, recommending doing some deficit spending, so that would that surplus would offset that the $286,000 projected surplus would offset that $111,000 deficit, and we would still have approximately 19% of your reserve would still remain at about 19% of general fund expenditures. Measure J, we spoke about this earlier. Again, this fiscal year, we're projecting it completely eating away at its reserves due to a deficit state. We're having to transfer in from the general fund $271,000 in order to shore up that, plus a $48,000 the one police officer position, Measure J share. So this is something when we talk about pensions, we'd like to kind of talk to the council, as well as further discussion about the future of Measure J and how we handle those deficits and its impact. And we look at this as not just a Measure J problem, but an operation problem, a financial problem across related funds. We have a finite amount of resources to deliver certain services, and so anyway, we just want to talk more about that in the future. Measure H, good news. It's projected to generate about $1.1 million, and $594,000 of that would go towards debt coverage and capital projects, and $516,000 goes towards debt service that we mentioned earlier. Measure L, more good news. We're projecting a revenue of $2.2 million. It assumes $2.2 million is set aside for street, sewer, and water line projects, which we'll talk about later. And then your sewer enterprise fund, we did assume the 7.25% rate increase and capital connections, as well as the inflationary impacts. And so we start out with about a $6.6 million, actually $5.7 million budget. And then we add the ASLs, capital outlay, conference training and travel, and you end up with $506,000 for capital projects for next year, which is adequate. Water Enterprise Fund, again, we also assume the rate increase that's becoming effective this month, and start out with about a $2.1 million budget. And then with the adjustments of ASL, $102,000, capital outlay, $24,000, conference training travel, $6,000, you have $30,000 for capital projects. And your smaller funds, just want to comment on a few things. Your parking fund's doing really well. We anticipate net revenues of approximately $119,000 for future capital projects. We're assuming about $60,000 in the past as our goal, and so we're actually far surpassing that. And these are good times. Now that could change if the economy dips, but for right now, we'll meet our goals for capital replacement this year. And just as a reminder, the 2014 CHP grant, which is partially funding a police officer position, this is the last year for that grant. So that $35,000 that we're assuming there will not be in your budget next year, just so you know. And all the other funds are pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so the nutshell, the bottom line is that your total operating budget, $23,664,128 revenue. Operating expenditures before capitalized expenditures, $20,649,281. So approximately $3 million available for capital projects and reserves. Any questions at this point? Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder, we had several projects that we primarily Public Works and Engineering completed, and they're listed there for you. There's a variety from the Corporation Yard improvements, Woodridge Court, to the Airport Road culvert repair. So just to kind of highlight the things that we're doing, getting a lot done. And your Measure HL committee at their last meeting did recommend $345,000 in new sewer system only projects, so projects that are just sewer related, and then $150,000 for a valve replacement project. And then a little over $2.2 million for projects that include streets, water, and sewer systems. And then $516,000 for sewer debt that we mentioned earlier. And also continue to use the Measure H CIP funds for sewer debt coverage as well. So now I'd like to hand it over to Terry Zeller and Rebecca Neves to kind of go through our proposed CIP budget. And the first one is the storage container. I think Terry's got that one.
Yes, good evening. The Community Services Department has been running a storage area at the Placerville self-storage since 2004, and those annual costs are around $2,700 a year. And so we're anticipating another increase this year. So we are recommending that we purchase a 20 by 8 foot storage container. There are already a couple of those up at the Corp Yard right now, and there is space for a third. And doing this purchase will, with the contingency still figured in, we will be saving. We will be paying for it within 2 years if we were to still keep our $225 per month rental. And so the total cost is around $45.10.
Thanks, Terry. And Rebecca, did you want to cover the street water sewer? Thanks.
Good evening. One of the first projects on the list there is the Broadway, or sorry, we didn't cover the Corporation Yard, did we? That one's actually under Nick, and I'll defer to Nick for the Corporation Yard improvements. Pardon? Right? We covered, okay, yeah. And then the Broadway maintenance project from Mosquito Road to Schnell School Road. This is for some improvements located along the stretch of Broadway, roadway maintenance project improvements. This will be following the Broadway sidewalks project that's planned to go out to bid later on this year. And then the following project is a storm drain replacement at the intersection of Broadway and Schnell School. That one is slated to be done prior to construction of the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project. That project, the Bike Lanes project, will be going out to construction in spring of 2020, and so this will need to precede that project. The small Center Street parking lot rehabilitation project, that's the small parking lot directly across the street from City Hall, is in need of repair. And then we have also the Center Street parking structure maintenance. There's some items on the parking structure that are in need of general maintenance, but also a reestablishing reoccurring maintenance fund for the parking structure itself to maintain that valuable asset to our community. We also have the water valve replacement project, which Dave mentioned. We have quite a few valves that are inoperable within the city's water distribution system, and this will become a reoccurring project to help address those failed valves. We also have the replacement of 2 of the pressure filter replacements. We have a total of 4 at the water reclamation facility, and the other 2 will be replaced as part of the MTU project that will be coming before council for contract approval here in the next meeting or 2. And then we also have the water reclamation facility storage building roof replacement. The storage building is located directly adjacent to the digester and has developed quite a large leak in the roof, and that also happens to house a lot of the city's documents for all departments, and so that one's important to get replaced as well. We also have the Myrtle Avenue sewer line repair. That line is old and inaccessible and unmaintainable, and so a new sewer line will actually be installed. And then the Cribs lift station maintenance project, that's one of our last lift stations that has not yet been maintained. And through, a developed project, it has ongoing regular maintenance, but this project will actually address a few outstanding items related to the electrical service panels and the operational generator. And that completes what I have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nick, I didn't mean to skip over. Did you want to comment on the Corporation Yard?
Sure.
Project?
The corporate project that's listed up there would include covered storage for our materials, for our cutback, our sand, our gravel. Currently we use tarps and go through quite a few of them when they degrade. It'll also consist of some interior building repairs, sheetrock, some of the roofs falling down, and just an upgrading of some old buildings and facilities at that location.
Thank you, Nick. So a few other items that we want to bring to your attention. It's been several years since we've done a comprehensive master fee schedule. So this is the schedule that would include all your fees. The Community Services Department's done a great job in annually adjusting their fees, but the rest of us have some work to do. So this summer we were going to update that and then come back to you in the fall with some recommendations for those fees. And then also we talked about having a CalPERS pension workshop in the fall to talk about where we're at on that, and then also some options for the council to consider to shore up our budget over the next 5 years. And then also Measure J, what do we want to do in shoring up Measure J fund, especially as we enter into a kind of a cooling period in the economy. So with that, in your packet you do have the approximately 140-page budget document, and the format is the same as last year, multi-year summaries of all aggregate operating revenues and expenditures, as well as detailed expenditure summaries for all department and divisions. If it's approved tonight, it would become the city's official spending plan for 1920. Both budgets are living documents that can be revised at any time. So, and it will get revised. It just happens. So, also I want to thank Councilmember Taylor. She caught some oopses. There was some percentages on the operating budget that were inaccurate, and I apologize for that. But this is kind of a draft. The final budget, which will be your adopted budget, will make those corrections. So thank you for pointing those out. So I'd like to publicly thank your budget team, the City Council once again working together to balance this year's budget. It wasn't easy. It is a responsible plan for operating the city over the next 12 months and an investment in the future. I'd also like to thank the Measure HL Sales Tax Committee for their help in developing the CIP budget this year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask that you adopt this budget as presented.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate all your hard work. And I ask the council if they have any questions on everything that you have presented. Kara?
I don't have
Thank you for catching the errors and percentages.
I don't have any questions. Just to comment that it was this is my first budget cycle, but it's a bit frustrating feeling like the economy is doing really well and to feel like we're not on better standing in terms of expenditures and revenue. But so it was kind of sad to see cuts in places where I would have liked not to see them. I was really hoping that we would get more money for like fuel maintenance and code enforcement, and that didn't happen. So, but on a positive note, we do have a lot of roads that are going to be fixed and a lot of CIP projects. So I'm happy to see that.
Thank you. Patty, did you have any questions for Dave?
No,
Or the other department heads?
We've probably gotten them all answered. We've been through this for a number of sessions, so.
Thank you.
And I have to agree with Councilmember Taylor that it is disappointing, and I don't know, we just don't have that tree out there that we can go and pluck money off of us, so.
Money tree.
Everything's so expensive nowadays.
Well, Michael, questions for staff right at this point?
I have one. It's more just of a clarification, I think. And this would be for Nick or for Dave. But when it comes to just like our regular, we get a phone call for a pothole or tree falls down, something like that. Does that fall under general street maintenance? Is that the line item for that when we're doing any of that, or are those different fund areas? Just like for your regular, there's after a storm, a big hole develops, and we go patch that up on Spring Street, whatever.
For both those items? Yes, sir. For both those items that you mentioned, our staff would code it to streets maintenance.
Gotcha. So that would be, so I'm looking at that. So for the proposed, it'd be at 349,211. That's, if I'm reading that right, then page 47.
Yeah, that would fall under general street maintenance. So, yeah, the 349,211, correct.
Okay. And that was a decrease of 21%.
The reason there's a decrease there is because of more intensive cost recovery. So we talked about engineering and the contra expense. We actually looked at public works. We looked at all cost recovery. We do it the last couple of years. We've really dug deep to see where we can recover costs. And so I worked with Nick Stone and basically looked at every position and what we felt comfortably we could recover in costs for projects. So in other words, if one of Nick's staff, if a public works employee is working on a capital project that's funded from gas tax or some grant, we can recover those costs, direct costs, so them working on the project, and that benefits your general fund. So we looked at that. So the number actually got bigger, and then it shrunk because of cost recovery. The other thing is you have had some turnover in staff where that's created savings as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for me for right now.
All right, very good. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing on this matter and ask any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 11.3, which is the adoption of the 2019-2020 budget. Seeing no one approaching the podium, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this item. Bring it back to the council for further discussion and action. I had one question for Mr. Morris, and it has to do with the efforts that we've made in the last year to improve our ability to actually do code enforcement. And I know it's come through some creative financing and the award of some grants. And could you explain, Cleve, how we have been able to make some progress in the code enforcement positions and the potential for some further improvement later this year?
Yes, as of, I think it's been, Pierre, about a month ago, we do have a full-time code enforcement officer now. In the past, we've only had that service as a part-time officer. We do have a full-time code enforcement officer who is working in that area. However, I have to stress that that is partially funded through the tobacco grant that we got. So a portion of her time, half her time actually right now, is working on tobacco illegal purchases, et cetera, enforcement of that, and some other things that we're working on in that area. Along those lines, we are still waiting to hear on our grant that we applied for through FEMA to obtain additional funding for that purpose for code enforcement, vegetation management, and et cetera. Assuming that we get that, and it's still going to be towards the end of summer, August, September, before we're going to hear on that. The idea is that we would add that to a half-time code enforcement officer. My intention at this time, and we'll have more discussions on this, is that we would make our current code enforcement officer take over that role, and then we would hire a separate code enforcement officer, part-time position, to handle the tobacco grant portion, because that is kind of a specialized area where the southern would be general code enforcement with a focus on vegetation management and fire prevention. So yes, we have improved by making that position full-time. Just the fact that the position is here, every day, full-time, is a big help in being able to address those issues, stressing that a portion of that is to address the tobacco grant that we have obtained.
Well, thank you, Clive. And then I received information that the state is looking at a third round of tobacco grants. And I know that we forwarded that off to the chief to see if that's something that will be a future source for some further funding. So there are some good possibilities out there. Chief, did you have any other additional information?
Yeah, I know there's more coming, but we're barely getting off the ground on the one we received. So I'm really hesitant to start applying for more grants before we fully get the activities going and the grant we have now.
Okay. Well, knowing how long the state takes to do things, I know you'll be well up to speed before that happens. All right. Any other comments or questions from council members on this item?
I'd like to move the item.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Before I call for the vote, I would just like to thank all of the staff, all of the department heads and staff members that have been involved in this process. And I would also like to thank the new council members for their effort in diving into the first budget and sharing the same frustration that given the signs of the economy that are out there on Main Street and Highway 50 and as we travel around in our region and the good economy that we currently enjoy, it's very frustrating to barely be able to hold the line to provide services to the community. The fact that there was no public comment on this is unfortunate because we are at a very delicate position in all the years that I've been involved. Having gone through the 2008 Great Recession, there were actually happy times before that. We would have service organizations lined up every budget year, Chamber of Commerce's, downtown associations, and things like that, youth organizations that would successfully get small grants from the city, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. And it was real fun to be able to do that. It's been a long time since that has happened. And as Mr. Morris's letter, which is a part of the public record, it's a 3-pager this year, and I think he does a nice job of outlining the frustrations that we're having in maintaining the service, the level of service that I expect us to provide. And I look around town, I think my fellow council members share the same concerns of we're not getting things fixed, we're not getting the weeds cut, we're not staying ahead of these little things, and we're certainly not being able to add the positions that we desperately need. And I would want my department heads to know that I would love to be able to get another person in finance, another couple people at the public works yard, and another 1 or 2 people out in our parks, and so on and so on. And sadly, as Mr. Warren has very clearly demonstrated, the money is simply not there. So we will continue to do this with very tightened belts, and it is going to take time. It's going to take more time than we want, but that is the unfortunate reality of the situation that we face, and that's with the CalPERS, $19 million unfunded liability. That is not something that this council, I think, is willing to ignore. There may be other cities that have done that with great peril, but $19 million unfunded liability, that will always be the thing that I'll defend our employees as we continue to do the best that we do with what we have available. So with that comment, I would ask the clerk to please call for the vote.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion carries. And again, thank you to all the department heads for all the time and extra effort that you put in on this on weekends and at night to get it done. Very much appreciated. And as Cleve said earlier, I think it was Cleve, this is a working document. So if it needs to be modified, we will bring it back for modifications as the coming year's challenges present themselves. Moving on to item 11.2, adoption of a resolution establishing the appropriations limit. This is always a fun one, Mr. Warren. There's money left on the table.
I wish we could find the difference for the ban limit. But this is a routine item that you take action on annually. Section 7910 of the State Government Code requires each government agency to establish an appropriation or GAN limit by resolution. Each year, the city is required to adjust its GAN limit by both the prior year per capita personal income increment and prior year change in population, which was provided by the State Department of Finance in your packet. The change in per capita personal income was actually 3.67%, and the change in population was 0.7%. Based on these factors, the fiscal year 18-19 GAN limit is calculated to be $23,083,417. The general fund proceed revenue subject to the GAN limit is $6,753,647, leaving $16,329,770 of unused appropriation limit. So once again, Placerville is well within its GAN limit, and with that, staff requests the council to adopt a resolution establishing the GAN limit for fiscal year 18-19 and determining compliance with Government Code Section 7910. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, very much. Any questions from council before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, thank you, Dave. I'll open the public hearing on this. This is a routine item. It's very interesting, though, to see what we're entitled to collect and what we actually do collect. Any member of the public wishing to comment on 11.2? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I'll close the public hearing on the matter and bring it back to the council for action. Someone like to make a motion?
I've actually got a question.
Certainly.
Do you know of any cities that collect the entire amount that they're allowed to? Does that data exist? Because I'd be interested to see what they're doing.
How they do it.
Yeah.
I don't know of any city that has exceeded, but if you look at more affluent areas of California, you might find some that are near it or maybe even have hit it.
Is there, are you aware of any like list that ranks the cities based on where they fall with the scan limit?
I've never really looked at it that way. It's
Okay.
more of a compliance thing. It's not, it's something we have to do. It's really not, there's not a lot of statistics out there. However, I believe the state does track that, so I could look into it and come back to you if you like with some information.
I'd be interested if
Sure.
it doesn't take
Yeah,
a
we
lot
can
of
look into it.
Yeah, it remains to be seen whether or not the state of California, at least in its current budgets, lived within its GAN limits. Department of Finance would probably have some pretty interesting analysis for you, Dave, on that one, but it's dubious to say that if they're within it actually. But on that note, unlike the state of California, I will make a motion to move this forward and adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilmember Borelli. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza? Aye. Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And thank you, Karen. That's a good question. We should find, if you could find us one city, Dave, it'll give us an idea of what our goal really, what that city looks like.
I would suspect if you looked at Auburn or Grass Valley, they're probably in a similar situation. Not quite exactly, but
Yeah.
similar.
I was just gonna say, the one I always look at that may be exceeding their amount would be like the City of Industry. If you look at their, Dave mentioned our sales tax per capita is $343, I think is what it was, Dave, approximately. Theirs is $11,000-$12,000 per capita. Very small population, primarily all industry is what it is, and so that's the example I used. I wouldn't be surprised that they exceed their GAN limit and have to return money. So, but I don't know that for sure.
All right. Well, thank you. So everybody has to leave. All right. Let's see. Moving on to item 12.1. Review a final draft request for the proposal for reuse of historic City Hall and direct staff to make changes and or to authorize staff to release the proposal. Mr. Zeller, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, City Manager Morris, Mayor, and Council. Tonight, I am pleased to present the revised RFP, and I would like to summarize the staff report that you have in front of you, reviewing the draft for your consideration. Just to go back a little bit in history for the sake of the public, on May 28th, the Council took an action to reject the two proposals that had been received and to develop a new RFP in a process for consideration. And on the 11th of June, Council reviewed a revised RFP for the Historic City Hall, and the revisions to the proposal set up a new calendar of deadlines as well as modifications to the body of the RFP based on public input at the presentations and during previous public meetings that we'd had. So the council requested changes be made based on their input and the comment, and for this revised RFP to return for action at this meeting. So the staff report was drafted to address these questions, and the summary of input has been organized into general questions and statements within the report here, with staff responses and any revisions made to the RFP as a result. So what I did was set up a series of questions and answers to try to focus on the general questions we had and to make some sense of all the different questions that had come forward. So we had a question on why only nonprofits are allowed to respond to the RFP, and the answer is that this speaks to the preferred arrangement for the lease by the city, and so there weren't any changes to the RFP deemed necessary due to this question. We also had a question on a condition of the lease agreement that bars organizations from using volunteers in renovations. This was looked into, and it's understood by staff that this would amount to a public work, which would require conformance with the state of California's wage rules and public contract code, and also that it would also pose some potential issues with liability control and workman's compensation also. There was a question on the lease attached to the RFP and whether or not it can be labeled as a sample lease, and I reviewed that. And it does appear that it has been labeled as sample both on the original and the revised RFPs, and so no changes to the RFP were needed in that concern. There was several questions about the role of the Planning Commission and where that body would participate in the process. And in consulting Pierre, it's been determined that they would need to be part of the process, but not the RFP, but any potential lease and then changes to the site that would be brought forth by the RFP. And so that is when they would be brought in. And also, Old City Hall is mandated to go through sections 1049 and 10410 of the site plan review process. And this 10410 specifically does include the state or the federal requirements for historic buildings. So there isn't any requirement in general for the commission to be involved in the RFP process, so we didn't change anything in that regard. There was also a question on asking if there could be annual reviews with the lease, and so I think that was a good question and a good substantive change. And so there has been an addition to the sample lease under Article 19B for those annual reviews of conformance. There were questions within the public comment and then some written questions afterward, questioning whether Section 6, Article 6, violates free speech under the First Amendment. And what this section was asking for is for proposers to refrain from disparaging comments. What it does allow for is for objective comparisons and contrasts between the proposals and doesn't impinge on speech outside of those confines. So within the proposal and presentation is really where the focus was for that. So the RFP language in this section was changed to emphasize the intent of the requirement for professional conduct in the interest of the long-term public relationship necessary between the city and the successful proposer. We had another question on if language and emphasis on historical significance can be made more specific, and we did do that, and we highlighted again Section 10410 of the Placerville Municipal Code, and that includes the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation guidelines for historic buildings. There was also a question on if the RFP could be modified to increase the scoring value for maintaining historic character. Looking at that, this scoring has come under criticism multiple times, and it was staff's opinion that it was in place during the subcommittee phase to help quantify proposals. And a decision was made on this new draft RFP that we could keep the list of considered elements in evaluating proposals, but remove the points associated so that the proposals aren't based on scoring specific points. To put it in other words, we wanted to avoid proposals focusing on studying to the test, if you will, instead of focusing on their own intrinsic values. And so a change was made to remove the scoring but keep the evaluation criteria. Another question was that that the public should have the same 2 weeks that the council has to review the RFPs, and that the protest period is too short. And so looking into that, just to try to clarify what happens is that once the proposals are opened, they're going to be made available to anyone requesting their content the day following the deadline. And so the protest period is intended to offer proposers a chance to bring any concerns to the city following the deadline, but within a reasonable amount of time. And in consideration of that, the RFP has been revised to allow a 7-day calendar window for protests from the 4 days that were subsequently in the June 11th iteration. Wrapping up on these last 2 questions, there was a question about regular mail as opposed to email, and really for the purposes of this RFP, and we wanted to make sure that we would remove any delays in the U.S. mail delivery, and so that we would have fairly instantaneous communication via email, and so that was kept in. And then there was a question about requesting a definition of the city and what the statement best needs of the city means. And in my opinion, this question is focused on the overall evaluation criteria and another reason to remove the number and point system from the RFP. And the RFP states in many sections that it's the sole discretion of the council to award or not award any specific proposal based on what the body feels meets the definition of best needs of the city. There was a final revision made on the amount of pages that could be submitted from the RFP, and they went up from 20 to 30. So in summary, the revisions to the RFP that you reviewed at the June 11th meeting are the requirement for the lessee to submit to an annual review for conformance of the lease, addition of language to conform to the city ordinance of the municipal code describing the requirements for historic buildings, removal of the points designation, extension of the protest period from 4 to 7 days, and an increase in the RFP page limit to 30. It's worth mentioning too that there's language in the RFP for proposers to pose questions to me once the RFP is publicly released, along with a timetable and a deadline for my responses, which are July 19th and 24th, respectively, on that calendar. This allows the council to approve the RFP for release at this meeting with any further questions generated by the proposers. There is a process for being addressed. So in conclusion, I would like to turn this over to the council or the public for questions, and we will amend the RFP based on any changes that the council requests at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Excellent report. Appreciate your efforts on this RFP. Is there any questions from the council from what staff has presented at this point? No? Okay. Mr. Morris, did you have anything else to add?
I think we're good.
All right. And for that, then I'll go ahead and open the public comment on this item and invite any member of the public wishing to address the council on item 12.1 to please approach the podium. Good evening.
I want to thank Terry for the work that he put into this and the consideration that was made to the public comments. So I just going through it, there was a couple of things I was concerned about. On page 5, it talks about, you know, if you miss up on what you submit, you may be disqualified. So this in here talks about needing to have 6 copies, and if you don't have that, you'll be rejected. But then on page 8, it talks about 1 original and 5 copies. So I just want to make sure that copy on the first page includes the original, so you don't get in trouble because one's an original and 5 are copies, or because it says 6 copies. It's a little, I mean, normally it wouldn't concern me, but it states in this paragraph, if you don't do this exactly right, your thing could be thrown out. So I just want to make sure that that paragraph matches the one on page 8. And then so there was I think I asked the question about the lease agreement, because in what's in the document is a sample lease agreement. So you're assuming, and it does talk about throughout this document that once there's you pick a proposal, that you will go into negotiations with the lease. So on number 5, it says the lease shall be substantially the same form and content as the attached lease marked in attachment number 4, which is a little bit different than what it says on pages 11 and 12, because on page 11 it says the successful proposal and the city will enter in negotiations for the proposed reuse and lease, meaning that they'll have a discussion about it. But here it says on 7 that it will be the same content as what you put in as the sample. So I don't really want to go over the whole sample lease because it's pretty detailed, but there's a lot of concerns I have about that, but I wouldn't worry about it if it's going to be negotiated after the fact. So that's the concern I have with the leases. And then, and I did talk to Terry about this, and so I appreciate it. He actually answered my question that I had asked him earlier about what best meets the needs of the city. And to me, that's kind of a vague statement that you're trying to, reach that mark. And is it the city council? Is it the city community? And I think the answer was that you have been given that mantle, that it is pretty much up to your discretion what the best needs of the city is. And I think that's what I got from the information. And again, my biggest concern is with the preservation of the historic elements of those buildings. And we've taken out the point system, so it's not a priority, but I still have a concern about it if it could not be a percentage or something that is evaluated based on that building being, the integrity of the historic elements of it being high on your level of percentage of concern. I think that was mainly my concerns with the RFP. Let me look real quick.
All right, thank you, Sue. Appreciate your thoroughness.
I think that was it. Thank you.
Is there another member of the public wishing to address the council on this item? I should note that we are taking notes of the questions that are being asked or comments that are being made, and we will address those at the end of public comment. Good evening.
Good evening, council. John Clarici, resident, taxpayer, and voter in the city of Placerville. Kudos to staff. I think this is a very nice, tightly done, very well done RFP. It'll give you the kinds of information you'll need to be able to make a reasoned decision about something that's very important. I did send in a letter, and I think it was shared with all of you, and I'll just publicly say that I have a request, and I don't have the thing in front of me, but it's part of the schedule. The schedule says, you hand them in, they get evaluated, and then somewhere near the bottom it says, and applicants will be provided an opportunity to do a presentation before the council in a public meeting, or something like that. And I think that should be amended to applicants who have successfully handed in an application that meets all the criteria that are stated in the RFP will be allowed to do that. We don't want to give license to people that can't fill out the application. And as a resident, voter, and taxpayer in the city of Placerville, I demand that folks that can't figure out a way to fill out the application not be allowed to present it. I don't care who the heck they are. So that's the one thing. The other thing I suggested, and this is actually something after the fact, that since we have, assuming it's the same applicant, so it'll be the same group of people, the city has a track record with these people. Arts Council is a tenant. The Taylors have fixed a building up in town. What do we know about those two efforts? Have they been good tenants? Have they done what they're supposed to do? This is public information. It should be made available. We're entering into a long-term agreement with a party. We should know exactly how they have behaved doing things with the city. And then finally, the issue of who reflects the interests of the city. That's you. You five, you get that job when you get the big chairs. We, as voters in the city, express our feelings about that through voting for some of you. That's it. If you want to make a presentation, a proposal that's effective, you got to figure out a way to count to 3, because that's what it takes to move something past this board. It's not rocket science. It's called responding to an RFP. It's putting together a good proposal that is persuasive, that makes sense to people, and compels people to want to vote for it. No one needs to hand you a roadmap to that. So it's count to 3. You the folks have to make this decision. It's one of the more intriguing, sometimes nerve-wracking, but one of the funner parts of the job, I think. So anyway, those are my 3 things. Thank you very much. Once again, kudos to staff. They did a great job. Good night.
Thank you, John. Is there another member of the public wishing to address the council? No re-comments. No, ma'am. One chance.
I worked really hard on this. I missed one sentence. I just need to ask you about one quickly.
I will allow this once only.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Pull the microphone down, please.
Okay, because this is kind of really pertinent to what was just
Quickly,
said.
please.
On number 6, on the professional contact requirements, basically you don't want anything, and this was explained by Terry, that's derogatory or inflammatory towards another proposal.
Correct.
But you also have in here, it's requested that proposals and their team members do not make negative or disparaging remarks about other proposers or proposals during the process. That's
Correct.
a very open statement. Does that mean if somebody that might be associated with these people says something out in Facebook? So I like that. I would actually like to see that sentence removed because it's so vague, but you could leave in the rest of it that does clarify what you're trying to get to. Thank you.
We will get that answered for you. And I think it's good because it got very nasty last time. Is there another member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 12.1?
Kirk Smith. Mayor, it's good to see that some of the suggestions made at the last meeting were incorporated in what's before you tonight, and that's good. For example, with reference to the broad description of in accordance with the historic character, you've added the provisions related to an ordinance already in existence. However, you have a provision that says that you can waive things, and that concerns me. I think that's number 16 or something down there, where it has a series of things that the city can do, and one of them is you can waive requirements or make some deviations. And I know at the last meeting there was a statement made about the balcony over one of the buildings, the Mary Jane building, and the suggestion was made that, well, you don't have to put it up if you don't want to put it up, and that wouldn't be consistent with the ordinance. Now, I don't know if that was the kind of colloquy that you have in Congress where someone's trying to create a legislative record or whether it was spontaneous, but it's troublesome because that would be a deviation from those historic standards. Your comment likewise about making reference to New Orleans, I appreciate it. I don't want to take that out of context, but I think New Orleans is a town that's famous for giving a great deal of respect for its historic character, which has done much to create tax revenues in that community, much so, more so than here. That kind of architecture of having a balcony was true all up and down the street. I know there's one building the family has I wanted to do that to, and this is kind of discouraging if that's not going to be perceived as consistent with the historic character. I asked somebody with the State Department, California Department of Historic Preservation about the kind of proposals that have been before you, and they rattled off a whole series of laws in the state. The California Environmental Quality Act was one, and why it would be applicable here. And then, of course, I asked, well, can you put that in writing? And the answer quickly was no, because they've been very cautious over recent years. So I think it would be very simple to incorporate the adherence to the California Environmental Quality Act, and that might be supernumerary, but if it's already something you have to do anyway, what's wrong with adding it? Give us some more assurances there. I appreciate the comments about, again, I've not been critical of any group. I have been critical of the council in the way that this was done, where a preference was given to creating an organization's pathway more than a year ago, and then decide, okay, well, now we're going to open up to a public process of competition. And that's what I found troublesome. So there's going to be inherently some advantages that you have. I don't know where this adage of possession is 9/10 of the law came from, but certainly it gives you an advantage when it comes to saying that you've got some viability. And I think that should be taken into account. You kind of measure it out. Certainly with reference to the suggestions made about narrowing presentations, no, I think that it's in the public interest that you have as much consideration to weighing and considering. And likewise, when it comes to a critique of comparing things, I don't think that's critical to point out what things are consistent with your ordinance and what things aren't consistent. That's certainly appropriate and consistent with not only free speech, but certainly the public interest in coming up with the best proposal possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there another member of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I will go ahead and close public comment on this item. I would like to thank all the members of the audience that presented their concerns this evening. It's very nice to get positive information and actually receiving some comments that I think are going to improve the document that we will hopefully be releasing here very quickly. Mr. Morris, Mr. Driscoll, do you have any comments, suggestions on some of the clarifications that were presented by the speakers?
I'll just mention the one about the number of copies, original number of copies. We do need to clarify that, and I'll work with Terry on that. We can that's an easy one and should be clarified. The remaining items, Mr. Driscoll can comment on the CEQA issue. The lease, when we adopt that, is a CEQA requirement, so we will need to address CEQA at that time. Does not require us to do anything now, but that's the law, and we will have to do that. So when we adopt a lease, we will review CEQA and work with our planning department on that at that time. Regarding the issue of preservation of the historic nature of the building, I think we tried to emphasize that stronger, that is critical and that is something that we feel strongly about. As mentioned, we removed the point system on that, but I think that allows the council to determine what they feel is most important, and I think at your last meeting you stressed how important the historic nature of those buildings is and maintaining that. So I think that will be consistent. I would like to ask, perhaps if I can, our city attorney to address the professional conduct language. Again, I don't think there's an issue there. I think we all understand what we want to do is have this be a professional process that we can be comfortable with, but I'll allow Mr. Driscoll to address that further. And I think that was most of what I heard. Unless anything
Thank you. John?
Just follow up on the city manager's remarks. Yes, the lease will be subject to CEQA review, and that will be something that will be handled at the time the lease is negotiated. We'll do a CEQA review. With regard to Mr. Smith's comments about waivers, there is language. He may have found something I didn't find in a quick review of the RFP, but the language in there that the city may waive immaterial deviations in the proposal. And that's standard language that you'll see in any RFP. So I don't think that poses an issue. With regard to professional conduct, we reworked that sentence to try, or that paragraph, to try and let people know the reason that was there. And I think it says it very clearly that it's there because the city wants to deal with somebody who will exhibit a responsible and respectful process with respect to redoing the old city hall. It's not intended to stop people from making comments on Facebook. That's their business, and that's their free speech right. What it's directed at is what you present in your proposal and in your presentation. And that's where slanderous or derogatory remarks, we're requesting that they refrain from those and tell us about the good things about your proposal. It doesn't mean you cannot compare your proposal to somebody else's in an objective manner. No, you have every right to do so. If you think somebody's proposal doesn't get to a point where it should be and yours does, in terms of something that it's going to do, whether it's in financing or whatever it might be, you have the right to point that out, but do it respectfully. That's all we're asking.
Can I just follow up on that
Certainly.
quickly? Under the part that was talked about is who are their team members. I think anyone that is identified in their proposal would be considered a team member, and those are the ones that we're talking about in this language. Right.
Yes.
So that would be very standard expectations for employment or participation. You would conduct yourself as a part of a team in a professional manner, or choose not to be a part of that team.
And I might add that this is not something new.
No, certainly not.
These things show up in Caltrans's contracts and things like that, so.
They're
we're
under
not-
my
we're not
employer's contract.
Doing something new here.
Yeah, I'm still under an obligation. Very common. All right. Let's see, we've had the public comment. Oh, Mr. Clarici's comments is regarding the applicant, I believe what he had was applicants who have provided a completed application that respond to all information requested in the RFP will be invited to present their presentation. And I think that's fair, because that tells whoever these folks are, whoever their team members are, that when they come here that evening, they're going to have a complete package. There are no holes. There are no, well, we'll get that information in 2 weeks, or that type of a thing. So I think that to include that change would also help tighten this up. In a discussion with the city manager, because of clarity, I was very frustrated with what happened and the efforts that were spent on this last one, to just overemphasize again when these deadlines are. I believe Mr. Morris, on page 4, where Terry has the item 5 tentative schedule for RFP, I believe Cleve he suggested inserting July 19th down in there in another spot. And then I wanted to note in brackets that there will be no extensions in a couple of different spots, like maybe on the July 19th deadline and also on the July 31st deadline, that there will be no extensions granted, just so that it's very clear. If you don't get in by 3 p.m. on July 31st, and Terry says it's 3:01, you were done. And that should not be any kind of a hardship for anybody that has one bone of professionalism in their work skills, to be able to know that at 3 p.m. on July 31st, you need to have your application in. But I'm also willing to put down very clearly, there will be no exemptions granted. Cleve, could you clarify the point I was trying to make for you? I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the paragraph 4, notice of intent to submit proposal, there was a request, I don't remember who it came from, but just out of clarity, we will add that down below to the tentative schedule to state that those notice of intent to submit an application, and that's required. Anyone that wants to has to submit that notice of intent, and that will be due on July 19th at 4 p.m.
4 p.m.
So we'll add that down below.
Very good. Any other council comments, suggestions for staff? Would someone like to make a motion?
I just want to make a comment. I want to really thank city manager and city attorney for the work on tightening this up, and especially Terry as well. I know we sort of dropped him into this as the new guy, and he really, I thought picked up the ball and ran with it extremely well. So I just want to give kudos to staff for doing this, and for all of our public that made some really, I thought, thoughtful comments and suggestions. I think I counted 6 that we took into consideration and made changes to our RFP. So thank you for everybody on that. With that, I would make a motion to adopt this RFP with the added tentative schedule on item 5 on page 4, as well as the language that Mr. Clarici had made public in terms of ensuring that whoever comes to do their formal proposal, that application is final. Or am I getting that right? Yeah.
And what about clarification on the number of copies?
And the verification on the number of copies, correct.
I was just going to ask for Sue Taylor's clarification on that, yes. And then we
I'll
already,
second
Oh, pardon me. No, go right ahead. Did you second the?
I did.
Thank you very much. And I just was going to clarify again, Mr. Smith was concerned about CEQA, and CEQA will absolutely be at the table when the appropriate point in this process comes along. All right, so there's a motion and a second. I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let me ask Mr. Zeller, with the information that you have this evening, sir, when do you anticipate the next step occurring on this RFP?
I believe it's stated in the staff report that we will be expected to let the RFP on July 1st.
Very good. So the RFP will be prepared and released on July 1st, and it will be available in this building at your office, correct?
That's correct.
So it will not be at City Hall, it will be at Town Hall. All right, well, thank you again, Mr. Zeller, and thank you all the members of the public for your participation in this process this evening. We look forward to a number of exciting RFPs. All right, moving on to item 12.2. I've lost my agenda. City Council. Thank you, Patty. Item 12.2, adopt a resolution ratifying a number of contract changes, and this is in regards to the now gone Sierra Tank Bypass Project.
Good evening, Mayor Acuna, Vice Mayor Zaragoza, and council members. The item before you this evening ratifies all change orders, provides final budget appropriations, allows issuance of final payment, and authorizes the notice of completion for the Sierra Tank Bypass Project. The purpose of the project was to remove an outdated hydropneumatic pressure tank that was located at the top of Country Club Drive directly across the street from the old golf course. This project was adopted as part of the city's 2013-2014 capital improvement program and was one of the original first Measure H funded projects with an initial cost estimate of $57,500. How far we've come. When I first arrived on staff at the very end of 2014, this was one of those projects I heard about immediately. The Sierra Tank was one of those facilities that either you really saw it or missed it completely because it had been there for so long. But the tank itself was quite large, and it housed 125,000 gallons and took up a sizable amount of space, along with the supporting pump house that housed the sand filters and the booster pumps. These outdated facilities were replaced by the 2 new parallel water mains and a pressure-reducing station. Due to the project's proximity to the city EID meter connection, the city also included EID as a project partner, and that included the replacement of a new 6-inch bulk water meter and supporting appurtenances as agreed to in the project agreement with EID, approved by council at the regularly scheduled meeting on April 24th, 2018. The description of work for each contract change order is included in staff's report and represents 12% the cost of construction, with 3% of that amount covering EID requested work for a total city contingency of 9%, which is within the 10% industry standard. Furthermore, this project was managed in-house by city staff in the amount of $40,000, which is 9.5% the cost of construction, whereas consultant contracts for a project of this size are between 13 to 18% for construction management services. The recommended actions are included in staff's report before you this evening. I'd also like to extend gratitude to EID for being a proactive partner on the project, and to our engineering staff, specifically Corey Schiestel and Brett Stone, for managing the construction, and to our Public Works and Finance departments, Dave and Nick. Thank you very much for all your efforts before, during, and after construction to complete this project. And last but certainly not least, to the voters of Placerville for the successful delivery of this Measure H and Measure L funded project. That concludes staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it. Does the council have any questions for city engineer? All right. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and open public comment on this. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 12.2?
Sue Rodman, Measure H and L Committee. And yes, I would like to say, hooray, we finally got this one done. Thank you to everybody who worked on it. It was a long time coming and a good thing to get done.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate your comment. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. I would just like to thank the city engineer. We'll pass along a thanks to whoever the paving contractor was, because they did an excellent job. Really cleaned up that whole area.
That would be Wilson Asphalt and Sealing. They're a local company.
Oh, excellent. Now,
Yeah.
please pass along my thanks. You cannot tell the work. It's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. I will. They did a great job.
I just have a real quick comment. Talking about the budget tonight and how disappointed we are that we're, I'd just like to call attention and highlight what Rebecca told us about how this project was done in-house and the money that was saved.
Yep.
So, congrats.
Thank you.
All right. Is there someone who would like to make a motion if there's no other comments or questions?
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Moved in second. A roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Item is approved. Thank you very much. Move on to 12.3, which is to adopt a resolution approving some consulting services agreements with REY for the intersection of Broadway and Schnell School, some storm drain replacement work. Rebecca, you have this report also, I assume.
I do. Thank you. The item before you this evening approves a consulting services agreement for engineering design services of the storm drain replacement at the intersection of Broadway and Schnell School Road, CIP 42004, as approved under item 11.1 this evening through our CIP project budget. This project, funded through both Measure H and L, proposes repair and replacement of deteriorating and undersized segments of storm drain at the intersection of Broadway and Schnell School. Select areas of sewer lining will also be completed to reduce inflow and infiltration, I&I, of the system within the project limits. The delivery of this project is needed prior to the construction of Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project, which will start construction in spring of next year. The city solicited from its on-call list for engineering services and received one proposal from REY Engineers. The proposal was found to be complete and in content and consultant services contract, and the amount of $54,575 is recommended for approval this evening. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Is there council questions for staff? I had a comment. No, actually, it's a question. We call it the Schnell School intersection at Broadway, but if I'm looking at my project limits correctly, it actually goes to east quite a number of feet. Takes in a bit of a storm drain area.
It does, yeah. The entire segment, pretty much from the most eastern limits to the intersection, is undersized. That was identified when we did the hydraulic study for the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project. Unfortunately, it's not really a project cost that you can include on a bike and ped project, upsizing, undersized facilities of an existing condition. So, and especially not on a bike and ped. So this was, it was a good time to go in there and take care of it now, because that area will be substantially improved through paving.
All right. And what document, when we get done with this particular design, what document will you have in your hand?
We will have project plan, specs, and estimate. Now, there's one of two ways that we're looking at delivering this project, and as we get a little further along down the line, we'll come back to council for a recommendation on that. The one is to deliver it as a standalone project and send it out to public bid as quickly as possible. The other is to actually just include it as a separate tracked item as part of the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes construction project, and utilizing the economies of scale of having a contractor already on site. We do have some storm drain work that is part of the project that was a justified expense in order to extend culverts, et cetera. And so it wouldn't be too far-fetched to have that contractor cover this as well.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Did I open the public hearing? Sue hasn't gotten up yet, so I must not. The public hearing is now open on item 12.3.
Sue Rodman, Measure H and Measure L. When Rebecca came and explained this to us, it was obvious that if you're going to redo the bike lanes and the rest of it, and you have a faulty storm drain underneath, it won't be long before that fails, and then you will be redoing all the work you just did. So this is something we have to do and has to be done before we finish the rest of the project. So Measure H and Measure L committee definitely supported getting this done.
I appreciate knowing that, because this is one of those things, it's all out of sight, and so it's all out of mind, and no one thinks there's a problem until a bicycle falls in a sinkhole. That would never happen, would it, Nick? No. Not while we're on our watch. All right, well, I'll close the public comment period on this item, bring it back to council for action. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing a little bit more of REY's great project work on an intersection that certainly can use some help. Moving on to 12.4, this is some exciting news. We get to issue a paving contract, and I'll be Mr. Nick Stone. I see your name on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening, sir.
The proposed item before you this evening seeks approval of a construction contract with Doug Veerkamp General Engineering for Lower Airport Road Pavement Rehabilitation Project from Broadway to Goldman Lane. The current pavement condition index is rated from poor to failed. This project was included in the 2018-19 capital improvement budget that was approved by Council on June 26, 2018, and is funded by the city's Measure L sales tax. The initial project was estimated at 5,900 square feet in early 2018, and the current project has grown to replace 17,069 square feet of asphalt. The increase in project size is due to asphalt failing at a rate faster than anticipated and above average wet weather conditions last winter. The cost difference between the initially approved project and the current project would be made up from the gas tax fund and assigned fund balance. This project will include a 3-inch grind of existing filled asphalt sections and will replace them with hot mix asphalt from near the intersection of Broadway and Airport to Goldman. Staff's recommendations are summarized in the report before you. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate that information. Is there any questions on this item, the portion of Airport Road repaving? I'll go ahead and open public comment on this item. Is there a member of the public wishing to address the council on item 12.4? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for action. It's always very nice to be able to award these projects to a local contractor.
And one that certainly is needed if you've driven on that road.
Oh, yeah, and
Anyways.
you know, as bad as, and you think, well, Airport Road, that can't be bad. But this past winter, I couldn't believe it, how it tore it
I know,
up.
it's really bad.
Between that cold weather in February, because that really freezes in there, and then all the rain we got the rest of the year. That poor old road the previous white marks just obliterated. I certainly can see the increase in square footage.
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded by Vice Mayor Zaragoza. Moved by Councilmember Borelli. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
On behalf of all my neighbors, I thank you. Yeah. And you know, as we worry about being able to move around during an emergency, you'd be amazed at how many people can find Airport Road when they think they need to get around from Cedar Ravine or, bypass one part of town. They will use Airport Road. So
I understand the wayfinders have been finding.
Oh, I'm sure they, yeah.
The lift people.
No,
Not you know what I'm talking. The ways.
those people.
Those
All right.
people.
We're almost done with engineering stuff. Item 12.5, adopt a resolution approving some agreements, existing consulting services with REY Engineering in the amount of $60,000. And this is at the one of our famous sewer lift stations. City Engineer Neves.
The item before you this evening approves an amendment to the existing consulting services agreement for construction management of the Sewer Lift Station Rehabilitation Phase 2 project, or better known as the Madrone and Giovanni lift stations. This project, funded with Measure H, Measure L, and Sewer Enterprise funds, was first adopted as part of the city's 2002-2003 Capital Improvement Program budget. The project was released for bid in August of 2017, and the construction contract and construction management services contract was awarded February of 2018. Mobilization of the project took place fall of 2018. The delivery timeline for this project has had many challenges and delays, and those that have impacted efforts related to construction management and additional staff time are summarized in staff's report, necessitating the requested amendment and budget appropriations before you this evening. Approval of the amendment with REY's contract represents 16.3% the total cost of construction. The project work, unfortunately, is currently suspended as the city awaits final connection by PG&E, and construction is anticipated to resume and can be completed by August. Staff's recommendations are included in the report before you, and that concludes staff's report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Rebecca. You made that painless for the most part. Is there any questions from staff, or excuse me, from council for our city engineer?
I'm not sure if for city engineer, probably for city manager, city attorney, and that is with PG&E's lack of getting this thing moving along, is there any way to recoup fees from them? Because this is obviously costing us more for their delay.
Look at them jump up to answer that question.
I can't tell you because I don't know enough of the details. But let me put it this way, I'm not optimistic.
Don't hold your
But
breath.
I mean, Rebecca and I can have a discussion about that, and she might change my mind.
My thought was that the cost it would take to actually recover it might be what it would
Exceed
cost the what's it cost us to do the project. So
Yeah, that's just so I mean, beyond everything else where we have issues with PG&E, this is just like another knife to us on this issue. So it's incredibly frustrating.
This isn't the first project that we've waited and waited and waited. And it's not just PG&E.
Let's
Telephone company.
stay with focus here for just a minute. Then we can take off after PG&E. Questions for staff at this point? You've had, thank you, Michael. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open public comment on this item, 12.5. And Sue Rodman, welcome to the Giovanni Lift Station Part 7.
That's about
It's
right.
over a decade in the making.
Yes. In fact, if you look at 2002 to 2019, we're talking 17 years.
Yep.
To get from when we realized we had a problem with these two lift stations to when Measure H first came into play, and it was on the very first list of Measure H projects to do. And now we're finally getting it done, and if we can just hold PG&E's feet to the fire, all puns intended.
That was
We got it.
See here.
We might get this thing actually done, but hooray for Rebecca, because she has hung in there with these guys to make them perform and actually get this work done. So kudos to our engineering department. This is a badly needed project. There's about 250 homes in danger between those two lift stations if we don't get them fixed. So this was one that was badly needed for a long time, and I am relieved to see it finally just about getting there. So hang in there for the last bit, and let's go.
Thank you, Sue. Is there another member of public wishing to comment on item 12.5? Seeing no one else approaching, I will go ahead and close public comment on the item, bring it back to the council. And I would just like to ask the question about at what point, it sounds like we installed conduit for an underground service. At what point did PG&E, or explain how that happened, please? Who's pointing the fingers at who?
So what happened was we prepared a design and we gave it to PG&E. Actually, even before mobilization, we did an application actually right after contract award. And we knew that there was going to be
Which was when?
That was, the project was awarded February of 2018 because we awarded
February 2018.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so we submitted an application at that time. And we knew that there was going to be, with lift stations, there's a lot of specialized equipment that goes out there. We had to order the telemetry and the panels and the actual wet wells themselves for fabrication. And it was about a 2 to 3 month fabrication. And we're thinking in our heads, okay, that's a good time frame. So we submitted the application. They prepared a design. And we were consistent with our plans from the beginning that the service connection was an underground connection. Currently, the two connections right now are overhead connections. So PG&E provided a design back to us, and when we called them out for inspections, it was noted by us and our contractor that the design that they had provided was actually for an overhead connection, not an underground connection. And that went back into the design queue, and it now is out of the design queue and is resting with a place in line to actually have a contractor go out there and finalize the connection. Our panels have all been green tagged. We're ready to move forward. The site's, for all intents and purposes, other than a little bit of cleanup, I mean, we've kept the sites secured because it's still a construction site. Other than a little bit of cleanup, the projects are essentially done. The wet wells are in, the panels are in, the generators are good. We've actually tested the generators already, and they look beautiful compared to what it was before. I mean, you know, God bless our water reclamation facility staff, because they have limped those babies along for well over a decade, almost two. And to have what they have now is just, you know, I'm so thrilled that the facility's been upgraded to the extent it has. But as far as it goes with the PG&E connection and delay, we're in line to get connected.
So have the fees been paid? I assume they have.
They have. Actually, I signed a check request form for Mr. Warren this evening.
Well, maybe we don't want to send that to them.
Let's don't pay them.
Yeah.
At what point did they, how many months has it been since they realized that they had designed incorrectly?
I believe it was, the realization was the beginning of April.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'd had a design finalized for about 6 months, maybe even a little bit longer.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cleve, did you?
Yeah, I was just say the frustrating part about that is when they realized it was wrong, you would think it would be put to the front of the queue and get done quickly, but it doesn't seem that happened. I spoke to PG&E this week, actually yesterday, I guess it was, and they assured me that it's all approved for construction now. However, all of their contractors that they're using apparently are on doing repairs that have been discovered during their inspection process, and those repairs are supposed to be done by the end of June, based on requirements of the Public Utilities Commission. And so they are telling me that in July, contractors should free up and be able to do the project, but we have no guarantee yet of when that work will be done.
That's not right.
So
we're still using the old system.
Correct.
That puts us at a huge risk if we have a spill.
Yeah, there is a liability with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there, well, I'll talk to you offline. Well, this project brings up to a bigger project, which is at risk because of PG&E, and we have federal funding, and that's the Mosquito Park and Ride. And while it's not a part of this agenda this evening, I think maybe it's a time to contact somebody in Sacramento. Perhaps our assemblyman, and see if we can get some help, because there's almost $1 million in federal funding at risk of being lost because PG&E cannot provide contract documents. Is my understanding on that?
That project was fully designed. We had an approved design, but because of the revised, their own revised design standards as a result of the series of fires and the PUC direction, et cetera, they actually took the designed project and pulled it back into design and are redesigning it, and included some changes, including adding another pole. We've been able to find a solution to not add that other pole, but we're going through the redesign process again, unfortunately, on that project too. But yeah, we've been stagnant on that project with no forward movement for quite a while longer than Madrona Giovanni. You know, usually construction, as Cleve mentioned, usually construction will go to the top of the list. You know, but even with the 2, 3, 4, month delay of design and waiting for a contractor, the projects that aren't critical, that are not in construction, definitely it holds us up. And we're awaiting the redesign and the accompanying utility agreement. Once we receive the utility agreement, because it is a federally funded project, we would bring that before council for approval. And with that, we'd be about ready to list it to bid.
All right, thank you. We'll have to talk some more offline, but
just wanted to add to that, one of the critical things that we've been pushing this project for too is that it includes at least a portion of the paving of Mosquito Road, which, as you know, council has received many complaints about.
Constantly, yeah.
For a long time, this is part of what's holding that up. Now we have separated that out, and hopefully are going to get out to bid this fall the remaining portion of Mosquito Road. But that portion is tied to this project and won't be done until this project can be done. So.
All right, thank you for all that information. We will have to talk a little later. Does someone like to make a motion on item 12.5?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Thank you very much. And thank you, Rebecca, for all your hard work on this. We will get it done. All right, brings us on to council reports. Let's see, I don't think we've met yet. Did we meet? No,
Yeah,
not
you
yet.
had a meeting.
It's been a long time ago. Transit Authority. Well, we have a guest in the audience. Matt, would you like to come up and introduce yourself to the... Good evening. I wasn't quite sure what you were doing here this evening. I'm sorry. Good evening.
Thank you.
I would like to welcome the new
Mayor,
the
Councilman.
executive director for El Dorado Transit Authority.
Thank you. I didn't prepare anything, but I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Mock, and as of just about a month ago, I took over as executive director of the El Dorado County Transit Authority. So I look forward to continuing to work with the city and thank this body and the staff for their continued support.
Well, thank you for coming this evening. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How did we do with the fair? Were we able to operate the fair shuttle safely this year? I know there was some concern about having enough lighting out there along Placerville Drive.
We did, and thank you to the city. I already spoke to the city manager about it, but yeah, we did have the lighting out there this year, and that was extremely helpful. I'm not aware of any close calls like we've had in the past, and the fair shuttle did operate safely, and ridership was down just slightly, I understand. I haven't had the final numbers, but again, pretty well used. And so, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for coming this evening.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for introducing yourself. I should say he did an excellent job with his first board meeting, I thought. He did very well. El Dorado County Transportation Commission.
I was not at that meeting. Maybe, Michael, you can...
Anything? Briefly now.
No, nothing
I don't
of...
think... I saw the agenda and it was really light. So.
Yeah, it was pretty light.
We're getting into that kind of a in-between season
Right.
now that budget's passed us. LAFCO, I'm going tomorrow night to LAFCO. And there is quite a little bit of activity going on with the fire districts. It ebbs and flows, and there's also some things going on up in Meeks Bay. So there is some interesting items coming before LAFCO. So I'll keep you informed at our next meeting. SACOG, Vice Mayor Zaragoza.
We did have a meeting in Citrus Heights as they're remodeling the SACOG office in Sacramento. Quick discussion again on sort of variable funding tolls, so that, depending on what time you're on it, the prices increases, decreases, and whether, those types of lanes would be applicable for the greater Sacramento region. And then again, this Friday, we're having the tour with SACOG here in El Dorado County for the forest management.
They're going to come up here and think the weather is always that beautiful.
I know. We're going to
That
have
Friday,
incredible
that'd be
weather for them.
Perfect to be out wandering around in the forest. Tell them to bring a rake.
Yes.
Placerville Fire Safe Council, how appropriate to be speaking about rakes.
Yeah.
I understand there's some changes afoot on the Fire Safe Council.
There are
And they're
changes.
Positive changes.
And it hasn't been finalized yet, so I won't report on it, but we're going to have a new, they're changing the board. Some folks are going to return, and then they'll have new board members. And we'll have a new chair. David Zelensky is he's stepping down, and but I think everybody else is pretty much going to stay. And then, like I said before, we had a wonderful presentation about
Patty,
how to harden your home.
Where are they meeting now?
Oh, we're meeting at the Veterans
They did
Hall.
move, okay.
And it's the third Thursday of each month.
At the Veterans Hall.
5:30.
At 5:30. So they've got a much nicer, bigger place, more
Bigger
parking.
place, and yeah, it's more accommodating.
Well, I appreciate your efforts on that. It's certainly important, and I know that they have been involved in looking at the draft ordinance that we'll be seeing in a couple of weeks.
And they're waiting for it.
So we'll make sure that they know that it's going to be coming before us. All right, and then 2x2 we have not met, but we do intend to meet soon. And just for the public record, myself and Councilmember Thomas are the members of the 2x2. Cleve, did you have any update on 2x2 scheduling?
No, my secretary Aaron and CAO's secretary Karen Feathers are working on finding a date. It's usually difficult to find a time when we can meet, but they're working on it.
This is, there are lots of challenges to getting the various boards together. Request for future agenda items. Is there any council member requesting a consideration for an item for a future meeting?
Should we consider the resolution regarding the Veterans Hall?
Yes. The city clerk has that information. And let me ask Mr. Morris, your thoughts?
Well, previously we had discussed this, and I want to assure the veterans and everyone out there that this is not anything at all that we disagree with the resolution. We just talked about it on a staff level and felt it was not necessary. There is some work that goes into preparing staff report and reviewing and making sure the resolution is properly done, and just the time to put into that. Again, we didn't feel it was necessary. We thought it was a moot point. We're not looking at that area for a park and ride. But if the council would like us to move forward and do something there, we will do it. So that's kind of where it stands right now.
All right. So it's my understanding that it could take many hours of staff time to do this, to make this a legal change. And the staff time that we don't have, it's a project that is dead. And there are other projects that have taken its place, which is the park and ride that's ready to be used as soon as we can get the connecting streets done. Would it be possible for a letter of intent from the city council? Can we do it something like as simple as that? Mr. Driscoll is frowning at me. To just clarify that at this point, we don't have staff time and we don't have several $1,000s to spend on this.
My suggestion was just
on
that
a dead project.
Perhaps a letter from the mayor and myself to them stating that we agree that project is no longer being considered. However, we do not feel it is necessary for the resolution, but we will officially note that that is being pulled, so we could attempt to do that.
I'd be more than happy to sign that. So would that be, have that as a future agenda item? We'll bring it and we'll have it actually, is that okay, Clay?
Yep.
So we'll prepare a public letter. I'm sorry, I can't do it. We will prepare an item for a future agenda that will have the letter outlining the city's current intent and explanation of the project. And with the council's approval, I will then, myself and the city manager will then go ahead and sign it. And I think that gives it some credibility, so that it'll be an action by the council to authorize the mayor and the city manager. Isn't that what your intent was, Kara?
Mm-hmm. That works.
I'm picking this up as I go. Sounds good. But that actually does make it very official, because then it will be in a formal action item that will always be available through the city clerk's office, that the council took action clarifying that particular item. All right, any other future agenda items? City manager and staff reports?
Just one thing I wanted to mention. Councilmember Borelli mentioned the Caltrans meeting that was held today. One item I wanted to bring up that actually Caltrans brought up that I had on my part to bring up with them also, that we had discussed, and I think is good information as we're moving forward. Previously, our police chief, James Ortega, has been working with Caltrans regarding the traffic signals on Highway 50 and what happens when we get our PSPS Public Safety Power Shutdown. I got to remember what those initials stand for.
I have a different meaning for those words, but
what is going to happen to those? Tom Brannon, who is the deputy director over maintenance for District 3, stated that they are working on that. His intent, as he was looking at, was at a minimum they would provide 2 generators, one at each of the outside lights, because that will slow people down so there won't be traffic issues coming into where the third one is. I brought up to him that will not help. If we're talking about 5 days, that will not help what could be a serious problem with traffic getting through town. And I think they pretty much agreed with me on that. And so they are actually doing some tabletop exercises regarding that tomorrow and the next day. And he told me that he is going to suggest that Placerville could be a good pilot project to set up those generators, because there is some work that has to go into that to set it up so that they can plug the power into that without causing it going back into the PG&E system and et cetera. So transfer switch, et cetera. So they are going to work on that and move quickly on it. I emphasize that this could happen, who knows, next week or the week after. We don't know.
So
But they
you're
do
saying
recognize
for
that they
all
want to
three
do.
lights,
Yeah.
not just
Well,
the-
we hope so. That's what I stressed to them,
Great.
that we needed all three. And I think they will move quickly on it. Just so you know, what I did offer is, because I discussed this with our staff, is if they're able to do that, we would commit our staff to assist with keeping the generators fueled up and running and et cetera. We may not want to be involved with doing the transfer, so they would have to do the initial setup, depending on how that is. But but we can make sure they keep running, because it will be very busy for a lot of people, and we're here. That's something that we can offer to help, and so they were appreciative of that. So
You need to remind them that they won't have this problem in the SMUD area, Roseville Electric, Reading City Electric, City of Lodi. Their power will be on, so those Caltrans facilities won't be affected.
Yes.
That's actually a very
Send
big
them up.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Caltrans stuff that won't be affected because it's not in the PG&E system where the electricity is afraid.
Right.
That is a horrible response from Caltrans, in all seriousness, that they would abandon the middle light. Did they not realize that that's an intersection of
think
two
they-
highways?
I don't think they'd really. He was just looking at that, and they were looking at that in terms of other areas too, not just here in Placerville.
Hey, they need to go complain to PG&E, huh?
What they can do to, depend on how many generators they have to buy, that could be a big cost to them. But anyway,
Yes, it could be.
I think that they realized that would not work in Placerville.
I was going to ask, I was hoping you were going to say that you got him to agree to come clean up the Mosquito interchange now that we were such good partners in the bridge project and they left such a crappy
You
mess
cannot
behind.
imagine how many times they
Rotten fences, I mean, it's just an eyesore.
Just so you know, the discussion today was that project, they have not closed that out.
Oh,
And
good.
I discussed with Rebecca that we need to emphasize that, and we'll work together to get that done.
And they also use that project as an example
yes.
of what not to do.
Do, yeah.
So that
They
had a
need to
lot of-
spring. They need to spring for a gate at their old on-ramp where contractors have pulled that cyclone back and forth, and it looks like something that's been used out at the raceway for a safety fence.
Let's get the generators.
So anyway,
first.
all right. Thank you for that, Cleve. That was really enlightening. Any other staff members' reports? All right, upcoming items.
I think Rebecca had one item. Oh, right, the hotspot study.
Thank you. Yes, we've scheduled the first Placerville-specific public meeting for the US 50 Hotspot Study public outreach effort. It's scheduled for July 29th at 5:30 p.m. in Town Hall.
Awesome. At 5:30?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
So the date got changed?
July 29th, 5:30.
It did, yes.
Oh, good, because I'll be here for that one. I wasn't going to.
That's why they did it.
Yeah, I think they said mid-July in the meeting today.
It was
but
earlier, yeah.
July
Oh,
29th
good, that's
is the
good.
date.
You and I both, Patty.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just hopefully everyone knows what that is. That's looking at our traffic issues, congestion that we have on Highway 50, and so that's going to open up a full range of discussions that they'll entertain.
And this is being hosted by Caltrans,
Correct.
District 3.
So just to clarify what this particular scope is, Caltrans is the advocate or the client on the planning document itself on the hotspot study. It evaluates several key spots within the western slope of the 50 corridor and also one key location in South Lake Tahoe. They're actually looking at the entire stretch. Where Placerville is, I believe, segment 4 of the report, and there's 5 segments total. This effort is thanks to our El Dorado County Transportation Commission. They actually secured a grant specifically for public outreach within the community of Placerville. And, all of us that's had an opportunity to either review the history of it or been a part of it know how much effort to date has come through and what it took to even get to the Highway 50 Ops project. And so the purpose of this public meeting is to kind of do a recap and figure out what our options are moving forward. Councilmember Borelli, was involved and engaged in the Highway 50 Ops job, as well as I believe you as well, and several members of staff. And we kind of remember the studies that went on and the models that were made that are actually on display in the lobby at District 3 headquarters for headquarters for District 3 in Marysville. So this effort will be to engage and solicit some input and just kind of catch people up. There's a lot of new faces in town since the reports have been opened.
All right, I appreciate that additional information. We all look forward to being here on the 29th. That'd be very interesting to see that process kicked off. All right, well, there are a number of items that we will be considering at our next meeting. I'm not going to go through those at this point. If there being no other business this evening, I'll go ahead and adjourn the City Council to our next regularly scheduled meeting on July 9th, 5:30 closed session, 6 p.m. regular session. Thank you all, and good night.